You know what it's like to wake up at 3 in the morning to a sound that has no business being there? Not a siren, not thunder. A quiet wooden tapping, like someone dropping a ping pong ball. The floor above. I live in a 100-year-old building. The walls are thick, the soundproofing is terrible, but I could hear this sound perfectly. Tap, silence, tap, tap. My name is Leo. I'm an ex-cop, and now I'm the night manager at an old residential complex called Blackwood Heights. If you think being a night manager is boring, you've just never worked the graveyard shift in a building where tenants die and their apartments sit empty for years. Apartment 4B was exactly that. 3 months ago, Mrs. Ellington was taken away by paramedics after a heart attack. She didn't make it, no relatives. The apartment was sealed, and now, at 3 in the morning, directly above my head, in an empty, locked apartment, something was tapping on the floor. They don't pay me to be a hero. They pay me to call the police. But as I reached for the phone, I heard something worse than the tapping. A quiet, drawn-out scratching. No, not the floorboards. It was the sound an old pencil makes when someone drags it slowly across paper. I went up to the 4th floor. The hallway smelled like dust and old medicine. The door to 4B was slightly ajar, even though, according to the reports, a court bailiff had sealed it. The plastic strip with the official seal had been neatly sliced through. I should have walked away. Seriously, every 9mm instinct in me was screaming bloody murder. But I pushed the door open. Inside, it was dark. Only the yellow glow of a street lamp pushed through the filthy curtains. The apartment was empty. All the furniture had been hauled away by relatives while Mrs. Ellington was still alive, sold off while she was in the hospital. Disgusting people, honestly. But the floor was not empty. The entire living room parquet was covered in paper. Cheap yellow sticky notes, you know the kind, little squares, 5 by 5 inches, thousands of them. They lay in a perfect carpet, wall to wall, and on every single sheet, the same word was written. Search. I bent down and picked one up. The ink was dark brown. I know that exact shade. It's how oxidized blood looks, not pen ink. The letters were crooked, shaky, the kind of handwriting you get when the fine muscles in your hands have stopped working. And at that moment, the front door behind me softly clicked shut, by itself. I spun around and turned on my phone's flashlight. The beam caught the door. At eye level, someone had taped a photograph to it with packing tape. A Polaroid. The photo showed this very same living room, only it was fully furnished with old oak furniture. Mrs. Ellington was sitting in the corner, alive, wearing her knitted cardigan, and she was pointing her finger straight at the camera. Or rather, straight at the floor, right where one of the floorboards had an uneven bump. If you've ever looked through the crime bulletins for our state from the 90s, the name Ellington wouldn't ring a bell. But if you looked into the missing children cases, Mrs. Ellington's husband, the late Jacob, was a school janitor, a quiet, polite man. No one could have imagined that they would find 13 pairs of children's shoes in his basement. Jacob was never caught. He vanished in '98, and the case went cold. Everyone assumed he'd fled the country. But I was standing in an apartment where, judging by the smell, decomposition had happened right here, while the old lady pretended to be a frail widow. I barely swallowed down the vomit and pressed the button on my radio to call for backup. The radio only let out static hiss. And then the papers on the floor started to move. Not from a draft. No windows in this apartment had been opened since the 80s. They just started flipping over, one after another, like invisible dominoes. Now, on the back of every single sheet, there was a different word, written in the same bloody ink. Don't turn around. You know that primal terror when your brain has already figured it out, but your body hasn't caught up yet? I felt a presence behind my back, not the warmth of a human. Cold. Such a deep cold that my breath started fogging, even though it was a stifling August night outside. I didn't turn around. I'm an old cop. I know the rules of nightmares. But I looked into the reflection of the turned-off television screen still standing in the corner. The black glass worked like a rear-view mirror. Behind me stood Mrs. Ellington. Or rather, what looked like her. except her mouth was sewn shut with crude surgical thread, and her eyes. There were no eyes. Just two black hollow sockets. But she could see me. She stood barefoot on her own notes and was reaching her hand out toward me. In her hand, she held a nail and a child's drawing of a house with a chimney. I lunged for the door, forgetting about ghosts, rules, and pride. I yanked the handle. Locked. "You don't understand, do you?" whispered a voice. But it didn't come through my ears. It resonated directly inside my head, like someone was running an electric current through my dental fillings. "I'm not hiding, I'm showing," she pointed at the floor, at that exact board from the photograph. My adrenaline was through the roof. I started tearing up the floorboards with my bare hands, breaking my nails. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because becoming part of this cursed case, disappearing in apartment 4B, wasn't the worst idea. The scariest thing would be to walk away and know you were a coward. Under the second board, there was no skeleton. The skeleton was deeper, in the building's structural beams. Under the board lay a diary, an old oilcloth notebook. I opened it to a random page. Jacob says they are still angels, just with dirty wings. I didn't believe him until I heard them singing. They only sing when they are in pain. We learned how to hurt them very badly. Today, a boy named Thomas sang us the most beautiful song. Jacob was wrong. They are not angels. Angels forgive. Thomas cursed us. I was shaking. I read these lines written in neat feminine handwriting. In the margins, there were drawings, butterflies, little flowers, and anatomical diagrams of the human body. Closing the diary, I looked up. The ghost of Mrs. Ellington was gone. The room warmed up. The door stood wide open. I ran out into the hallway with that notebook in my hands, went down to the reception desk, and called the cops. Not my buddies from the precinct. I called the feds. Because what was described in that diary didn't just concern our town. While I waited, I sat behind the counter, drinking scalding hot coffee. And that's when I noticed the last entry. It was fresh. The ink was still glistening under the desk lamp. "Leo, thank you for finding us. Come sing with us, Thomas." I threw the notebook away from me violently. By this point, my coffee had frozen solid in the mug. In the glass of water on the desk, chunks of ice were floating even though the air conditioning was off. The police arrived. They opened up the floors properly. Under the living room, running through the support beams, they found not one or two bodies. It was a mass grave. Jacob Ellington never ran away. He died right here, in this apartment, 10 years before his wife's death. His body lay on top of the others, and judging by the bone fractures, he didn't die naturally. Mrs. Ellington had beaten him to death with a meat tenderizer while he slept. You'd think the story is over. The monster is punished. The victims are found. They even wanted to give me some kind of civic award, but I don't need an award. I need sleep, because that story didn't end. It just began. The next night, at exactly 3 a.m., the tapping came back. But now it wasn't coming from apartment 4B. It was coming from my door. Tap, tap, tap. I live on the first floor, in the staff quarters. I have no neighbors. I looked through the peephole. There, in the fisheye lens, stood a little boy, about 9 years old, wearing dinosaur pajamas. He was barefoot and very pale. "Mr. Leo," he said, in a voice that sounded like a scratched vinyl record, "we can't just leave. You found us. Now you're our caretaker. You have to listen to us." I didn't open the door. I threw the deadbolt and started praying, even though I haven't believed in God for 30 years. I could hear footsteps multiplying behind the door. Bare little feet, dozens of them. They were whispering. They weren't threatening me. They were begging. Now I understand what Mrs. Ellington meant in her diary by singing. It's not a sound. It's a vibration that comes from these children. When they're near, your bones ache, and you hear a frequency inside your skull that drives you insane. A week has passed. I set up cameras in my apartment. They don't capture anything. But the audio recordings, if you amplify the decibels, you can hear children's laughter. And one single name, repeated syllable by syllable. "Leo, we're here. I tried to leave town, got in my car, drove all the way to the state line. The moment my tires crossed the "You are now leaving Blackwood" sign, the engine died, and the GPS rebooted itself and mapped a route straight back home. Tonight, I spoke to them willingly for the first time. I asked, "What do you need?" The oldest one, that same Thomas, answered me through the frozen bathroom window. With his finger, he wrote on the frost just one sentence. "Finish what was started. She is still here." And then it hit me. We found the bodies of the Ellingtons and their victims, but we only searched the living room floor. What about the walls? What about the concrete screed in the bathroom? What about the basement that's listed in the building blueprints, but there's no entrance to be found? The word "she" scares me more than any ghost, because if Mrs. Ellington was the caretaker of this hell in life, then in death her spirit stayed as the master over the children, and she won't let them go until I find her ultimate secret, until I find what she hid not from the police, but from the devil himself. The video is ending. I'm going to turn off this camera now, pick up a sledgehammer, and start breaking down the wall of my own bedroom. The plaster is new, but the mortar is still breathing. If you've watched this video to the end, then you're now part of the caretakers list. Don't worry. If your house suddenly gets very cold, or you hear a child's ball rolling on the floor above you where there are no neighbors, just turn the music up louder, and whatever you do, don't open the door. Even if a little boy named Thomas is asking for help on the other side. He's not what he seems anymore. As for me, I have to go. I need to dig.